So this is 206 reverse linked list written in Ruby, and basically same reverse a linked list problem. We're given the head node has access to a val and a next. So we're just reversing the singly linked list and returning that linked list. So 1 to 5 turns into 5 to 1, 1 to 2 turns into 2 to 1. If it's empty, returns the same thing, empty. The number of nodes range from 0 to 5,000, and the node's value could be down to negative 5,000 up to positive 5,000, and then can we reverse it iteratively and recursively? So first, I'm going to try with the iterative approach. So we want to return head if head.nil, or if head is equal to nil, then there's nothing there to reverse, so we just return it. So if we're going to be doing this iteratively, there's going to be some sort of like temporary variable containers so that we can do our swapping. But basically, we know we have our head right here. We probably want something to traverse it one by one, and as it's traversing, it's making a couple of swaps. Because one's next is 2, but we want one to point next to nil right now, and then move it along, and then we want 2 to point to 1, move this along, and we want 3 to point to 2, and so on and so forth. And then when we get to 5, we want to point 5 next to 4, and essentially, if we get to this empty space right here, it should stop, and then we should be able to return the 5, which is the thing that was just previous to it. So what I'm going to do right now, I'll say, let's have a variable called current is equal to the head. And so the head is going to be the current right now. We could have the previous could be equal to nil for now, because we want to connect current's next to be previous, which is nil. So that's how we want to connect it to be nil for now. And then we want next is equal to, we call it nxt is equal to current. Well, actually current dot next, because we want it to hold on to the 2. So then from right here, we can do like while current is equal to, or current does not equal to nil, do end. And next doesn't have to be there. We could just put next right here for now. So next, because as we're entering our loop, we want current to continue to move forward, but next doesn't really have to be defined until we kind of enter our loop. So since next is going to be set to our current dot next, and next is equal to 2, we want current dot next. We can safely reassign one's next. Since we stored safely the 2, we can now unlink it and say current dot next is equal to prev, which is nil. And so now that linking has safely been done, prev can now move to the current. And now since the previous is now keeping track of 1, we're safe to move the train forward. So current can now equal to nxt. And that moves it to there, and then as it continues going on, nxt is going to be equal to this current dot next, which is 3, and then it keeps on going and swapping, so on and so forth, until we get to current is equal to next, where 5 is equal to nil, and then that's going to say current is equal to nil. So then break, and then we just want to return the prev. And I believe that should do it. It works for that small test, and now let's submit it. Cool. So this is the iterative approach. I'm going to try out the recursive approach. It's head and And so if we want to do it recursively, we're going to be needing to take this same function and call it inside of itself. So same thing, return head if head.nil. That can help us if our head to begin with is completely empty, or if our head, when we reach the end of the list, is nil, because that means we've come to the end of it, and then break out of whatever iteration of whichever call from the stack that we were on. So ultimately, we're going to want to do the same thing, pretty similar thing, where we can have a next variable is equal to the head.next, and the head.next we could set it equal to something that was holding on to a previous, and then we could call it again. So essentially our previous to be equal to nil. We don't want to put previous equal to nil here, because if we run it again every time, we don't want previous to be nil. We want previous to have been the last passed in value, or the last previous that was kept track of. So in order to keep track of it in a recursive function, we could probably just set a new parameter and default value it to nil. In the beginning, it will be nil because there's no value, but as we continue to go along, previous could be replaced with something that we kind of updated. So we can have an nxt is equal to head.next, and then since we've safely preserved the next, we can unlink head's next and point it towards the prev. Head.next is equal to prev, and now normally we would have set our previous to be so maybe you can set from right here, you can do previous is equal to head. Previous is equal to head, or as the reason being is then we want to call reverse list score. Our second argument could be the head. The first argument could be the next, and then the second could be the head, because what happened right here, next is equal to, let's say we started right here, next, let's go to head.next, so it's 1, head.next set to prev, and then reverse list, again, calling this as the head, and then previous is the nil, so that'll make it go forward. So let's run this. And this should stop. Oh, and then we probably want to return. Next is equal to head done. So we start off with head 1. If head, return head if it's nil. It's not. Next is equal to head.next, so 2 head.next is equal to prev, which is nil, and then we reverse list of next, which is we put in head. We put in 2 as the head, and then head was the previous, so it's 1. So move that along and keep going, but we're gonna want to return something. I think we return previous instead. We return previous is if head dot nil, I think. Because at the end of it all, when we get to a point where we keep on going next, and then that current next, which is the head at that time, is nil, then we just want to return prev, which at that time would have been the actual thing that was the previous. If it were completely empty, prev still would have been empty, so I suppose that returns an empty list, but I think this is the way to do it. Yeah, this is the way to pass it with doing it that way. Okay.